The other family. The baby wasn't his. That's the first thing I heard Ngozi scream. Her voice cut through the house like a thunderstorm, raw, unrelenting, and filled with pain. I stood frozen in the hallway, every nerve on edge, as her words echoed in my ears. From where I stood, I could see her clutching her newborn, her body trembling with a cocktail of rage and heartbreak. Tears carved glistening tracks down her face as she hurled the words at her husband, Tunda. "Whose child is this? Whose child is this?" Her voice cracked like a whip, and for a moment the house seemed to hold its breath. But Tundi's silence was deafening. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend himself. He just stood there, looking at her with a mixture of guilt and something that resembled defeat. It had started as an ordinary evening. I hadn't planned to witness someone else's life unravel before my eyes. I was just visiting my dear friend Ngozi, who had given birth to her second child only weeks before. I came with a bag of groceries, diapers, and a small gift, a set of hand-embroidered baby blankets I'd ordered. When I arrived, it was Tunda who opened the door. His broad smile was as warm as ever, the kind of smile that put people at ease. If I'd had even a shred of suspicion, that smile would have disarmed me completely. "She's napping," he said with his usual calm demeanor, stepping aside to let me in. "But you can wait. She'll be up soon." The living room smelled faintly of lavender baby lotion, and the faint coos of a sleeping newborn drifted from the bassinet. Tundi offered me a drink, and we chatted briefly, about work, about the weather, about nothing in particular. Everything seemed so normal. Then he excused himself to take a phone call, leaving me alone in the room. That's when it all began to unravel. I wasn't snooping, I swear I wasn't. But there, on the side table, was a stack of papers, and right on top of that stack was a photograph. It caught my eye immediately. Tunde was in it, his arm draped around a woman I didn't recognize, his smile wide and unmistakable. Beside them stood two boys, both with his sharp cheekbones and bright eyes. They looked like a picture-perfect family, a family I'd never heard of. The air seemed to grow heavier around me. My mind raced with explanations, logical, innocent ones. Maybe it was an old photo, maybe cousins or distant relatives. But beneath the photo, a second layer of evidence caught my attention. Documents, utility bills, school forms, a hospital record. Tunde's name was on everything. And the address? It wasn't in Lagos. It was in Ibadan. My chest tightened as the realization settled in. This wasn't innocent. This was a secret. I was still staring at the papers, my hands trembling, when Ngozi entered the room. Her face lit up with a smile when she saw me. "Ah, you're here," she said warmly. I tried to compose myself, but I knew I'd failed. Her smile faded almost instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing," I lied. But my voice betrayed me, cracking on the single word. Her gaze fell to the table. She walked over, picked up the photo, and froze. "Who?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Then, as if on instinct, she began rifling through the papers beneath it. With each document she uncovered, her breathing grew heavier, her hands trembling more violently. "Tunde!" she screamed, her voice reverberating through the house. Tunde walked into the room casually, still on his phone. When he saw what she was holding, he stopped in his tracks. The blood drained from his face. "Ngozi, I can explain," he began, his voice calm but shaky. "Explain what?" she shot back, waving the photo in his face. "Explain this? Explain how you have a wife and children in another city? Explain why you've been lying to me all these years?" She didn't wait for his response. Instead, she flung the papers at him, scattering them across the floor. Tunda sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. "It's not what you think," he said quietly. "Not what I think?" Ngozi's laugh was cold and bitter. You have another family. You have children with another woman. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" The baby in the bassinet began to wail, startled by her, shouting, but she didn't stop. Tunde tried again, his voice soft and measured. "Ngozi, I didn't mean for you to find out like this." "Find out?" she spat, her voice breaking. "Oh, so you knew this was wrong. You knew, and you let me believe we had a real marriage. A real family while you—" She stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. Tunde took a cautious step forward, but she raised a trembling hand to stop him. "Don't come near me," she said, her voice cold and final. "Ngozi, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying." To what?" she shouted. "To have your cake and eat it too? To live two lives? To keep me as your backup wife?" Her words hit him like blows, and he recoiled, looking helpless. Her older son, Chidi, appeared in the hallway, clutching a toy car and staring wide-eyed at the scene before him. "Mama?" he asked softly. Ngozi's expression crumpled. She sank to the floor, clutching her newborn to her chest as tears poured down her face. Chidi walked over and rested a small hand on her shoulder. Tunde stood frozen, his guilt written all over his face. But when Ngozi finally spoke again, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Get out," she said, not looking up. Tunde hesitated. "I said, get out!" she screamed, her voice breaking. This time, he obeyed. He turned and walked out the door, shutting it softly behind him. The house was quiet after he left, save for Ngozi's muffled sobs. I knelt beside her, unsure of what to say or do. Hours later, after the children were asleep, she finally broke the silence. "I gave him everything," she said, her voice hollow. "I trusted him. I loved him. And this is what I get." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You'll get through this," I said, though my own voice wavered. In the weeks that followed, she began piecing her life back together. It wasn't easy. Tunde kept calling, pleading for forgiveness, but she refused to take him back. Her family rallied around her, offering their support. She poured herself into her children, determined to create a stable, loving home for them. One evening, as we sat on her porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she said something that has stayed with me ever since. "You never really know someone," she said. "You think you do, but people can hide so much. Still, the truth always comes out. Always." And she was right. Tunde's secret may have shattered her world, but it didn't destroy her. She rebuilt herself, stronger and wiser than before. As for me, I learned something too. Masks may fool us for a time, but they always slip in the end. And when they do, the truth has a way of revealing not just who someone else is, but who we are too.